Welcome everybody to the second in our Clean Heating and Cooling and Renewable Heat Now webinar series. We're really excited to see you all today, and we have a great webinar in store for you. I'm gonna launch a quick poll to find out where in the state or nation people are joining us from. So please go ahead and answer the poll while we let people trickle in, and we'll just get started in a few minutes. Wow, great showing from the Finger Lakes region, almost 40%.
Fabulous.
Nice to see everybody. We've got people from all over the state here with us today. New York City, Long Island, Hudson Valley, Capital Region. Hello, North Country, two from the North Country, Central New York, Finger Lakes, Southern Tier, Rochester in the house, Buffalo in the house, and at least two from outside of New York State. So it's really exciting to see everybody here tonight. Okay, we'll give it 30 more seconds and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, here's the results of our poll. Great to see everybody and welcome. This is, as I said, the second in our Clean Heating and Cooling Community and Renewable Heat Now combined webinar series. My name is Lisa Marshall. I am the Program Director of Heat Smart Tompkins and a member of the Renewable Heat Now campaign. And tonight's webinar is brought to you by Push for Clean Heat from Buffalo and Heat Smart Cool Smart Brooklyn. And I'm going to kick off by turning this over to the lovely and talented Sarah Berger from Push for Clean Heat Buffalo. So take it away, Sarah.
All right, thanks, Lisa. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So this is a second in a series of webinars brought to you by different clean heating and cooling communities campaigns across New York State. So we're really excited to see you here, and we are recording this and it's being live streamed on Facebook. So if you know of someone who wants to watch it and they can't make it, they can check out Heat Smart Tompkins Facebook and see it later. All right, so I'm sure a lot of people at this point are really familiar with Zoom at this now, but I just want to go over a couple of Zoom housekeeping things. So depending on if you're joining by your browser or by a phone, I don't know what it looks like on a tablet, to be honest, but I'm sure it's one of the two. The controls are all the same. If you want to mute or unmute, you want to hit the microphone in the red circle. Feel free to turn on your video or keep it off. You can click the camera icon in the yellow circle. It is really helpful for me to see people's reactions and faces, so I appreciate if you're on camera, but I understand if you don't want to be. We do have a lot of people here today, so if you have questions, if you could type them in the chat, or we're going to try to leave plenty of time for questions at the end. And at the end, if you have questions, you can go ahead and click the reaction and raise your hand, or you can just type in the chat. We'll call on you to ask your question out loud, or we'll answer it in the chat. Because there's so many people, please stay on mute so that we don't get background noise. So I'm going to go ahead and pause here and let any of the other campaign directors or managers or anyone who runs a clean heating and cooling campaign who's on the call right now to come off of mute, come on camera and introduce themselves and just say what counties or areas you cover. And let's start with Hayam, my co-host.
Hello, Sarah and Lisa, and all of the fearless and really wonderful campaign directors and leaders from throughout the state. I'm Chaim Gross. I am an architect from New York City. I'm chair of the New York City 2030 district. We're a partnership of stakeholders confronting climate change. We're implementing Heat Cool Smart Brooklyn, which is a clean heating cooling communities campaign, like so many throughout the state. And we are doing what everybody is doing for the climate, which is to try to make our homes more efficient and get rid of those fossil fuels.
Can I say hi? Hi, everyone. This is Lauren Broyce representing Sustainable Westchester. Our Heat Smart program located in Westchester County is called Energy Smart Homes. And if there's people on the call within Westchester, if you're wondering which contractor you should work with, how to get an energy assessment, who would be a good contractor for an air source or a ground source heat pump visit, head over to the Sustainable Westchester website. It's sustainablewestchester.org. Navigate over to the Heat Smart or Energy Smart Home section, and you will see the list of contractors that we recommend. And if you have any questions after the call tonight, feel free to give us an email or give us a ring at the office tomorrow, and we can answer any questions that you have about your specific situation. And shout out to all the people presenting tonight. Thanks, Sarah and Chaim and Lisa for organizing, and Michael. Bye.
Michael, will you introduce yourself?
Of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Johnson. I'm the Sustainability Campaign Coordinator here at PUSH. I've been with the organization for about 7 months, having come from a background in graduate education and sustainability leadership. And so, yeah, it's a pleasure to be here tonight.
All right. And Heat Smart leaders, feel free to drop your information in the chat so people can reach out to you. So we are one of many clean heating and cooling campaigns funded by NYSERDA across New York State. So on the left-hand side of my screen, there's a map of all of the different regions we cover. And I know out in Western New York, there's not complete coverage. So we're always happy to help anyone in nearby counties who's interested in a heat pump. After this webinar, we'll send slides and you can click on the links to find your local Heat Smart campaign. And so why are we here today? So one of the major reasons that we're talking about heat pumps is because in 2019, New York State passed the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, the CLCPA. And the CLCPA has lots of mandates in it, but one of those mandates is for New York State to get off of fossil fuels and adopt a massive amount of renewable energy. And so that's going to require a lot of changes. We need to change our grid, we need to change how we drive, or we need to change our cars and all these sorts of things. But the change we're here to talk about today is that we need to change heating systems that are inefficient and that need any sort of fossil fuel, be it gas, propane, or heating oil, to run. And so that's the focus today. In the Northeast, a lot of us, the vast majority of us, heat our homes with some type of fossil fuel or some type of combustion. So there's a combination of a few different oils and gases that we use. And so we really need to focus on switching over those heating systems. And then the other interesting thing about the survey from the Energy Information Agency is that a lot of people's homes actually aren't comfortable enough. So they have to use a secondary source of heat, maybe a space heater, to be comfortable in their home. And then another thing is that it seems like it's definitely getting more humid in Buffalo. We're getting a lot more hot days in the summer. And so a lot of people are interested in air conditioning for many different reasons. And so in the Northeast, if you are one of many people who live in a house built before 1960, it's really unlikely that you have air conditioning. And so heat pumps are a great way to not only get off of fossil fuels, potentially save you money, but also provide comfort in your home. So the major benefits of the heat pumps, and there's probably some I'm missing, but You can get heating and cooling in one system in most systems. And the only reason why I say most systems is because there's two components of a heating system, right? There's the system that provides the heat and then the way it's distributed in your house. So if you're like me and you have hydronic or hot water baseboard and you only want to use that type of distribution system, you cannot get cooling with that. But all the other systems you can. Heat pumps can also provide savings for those that heat with conventional electric strip heating, oil, propane, kerosene, and some conventional air conditioning units. So it's great. It's always great to see savings. They also contribute to cleaner air, both in our homes and in our neighborhoods. So if you're like me and you have a really old gas system and it's not directly vented, it's definitely adding some emissions into the basement, which we use a lot to do projects. So we're breathing in the air. But if you have a home that maybe has a newer heating system that is directly vented, where there's a pipe that brings the fresh air in and takes the bad air out, that's venting right into your neighborhoods. And so those pollutants have to go somewhere. And then the other thing that heat pumps do is they bring us one step closer to being able to use renewable energy to power our homes. And maybe that's solar panels on the roof, but maybe that's renewable energy offsite. Because if you have any sort of gas or oil system, that system can't be powered by renewables. So a lot of us, probably the vast majority, already have a type of heat pump in our home. Heat pumps are cold climate air source heat pumps specifically, but heat pumps in general are kind of a new technology, but they use technology that's been around for a while. So both our refrigerator and typical AC units, both use the same technology that a heat pump uses. And I'll get more to that technology in a little bit. So there's two main types of heat pumps. We could go into detail and probably get into 6, but we have a limited amount of time. So I'm just going to go over the two main ones. So the first one is an air source heat pump. And an air source heat pump has two components. So the first component is the outdoor condenser that you may have seen around. And then there's the indoor system. And that system can actually be a heat exchanger, kind of like what your furnace looks like, where it just looks like a box. And then if you don't have ductwork, you can get what's called a mini split. That is a wall-mounted unit that distributes the cool air. So heat pumps are a great option if you don't have ductwork in your house and you don't want to put it in for whatever reason. And then there's also ground source heat pumps. And ground source heat pumps use a similar technology as an air source heat pump with one major difference. And that difference is the in-ground loop. So basically with a ground source heat pump, what happens is the contractor will dig a hole in the ground. The size and the depth of the hole completely depend on where you live, though it does disturb a lot of land. And they'll run a loop field. And inside that loop field is circulating water mixed with like a tiny bit of antifreeze. And basically what it does is it circulates so that it gets to the Earth's temperature. And the Earth maintains a pretty constant temperature, even during the coldest parts of the winter. In Western New York, it's roughly 41 degrees. It'll be a little higher or a little lower, depending on where you are in the state. But it's always heating from a basis of 41 degrees. Whereas an air source heat pump uses the residual heat in the air. So it's heating or cooling from a basis of the air's temperature. So for this reason, ground source heat pumps actually cost a lot less to run, but they cost more to install. But they cost less to run because they're coming from a base temperature of roughly 40 degrees versus whatever the outdoor air temperature is. And I always like to show people pictures of what the equipment actually looks like in real life. You may see it walking around, or if you're visiting a friend's house. So the two photos on the right are pictures of air source heat pump condensers. This is just one of many brands. So they kind of look like flat air conditioning units. And then the pictures on the left are 2 examples of different types of mini splits. So here's a wall mounted one that I think is really common, but then they also make ones that mount in your ceiling, and they make ones that mount on the floor. So if you don't have ductwork and you don't want to install ductwork, mini splits can work in a variety of different setups for different homes with different space needs. And then for ground source heat pumps, inside the equipment looks pretty similar to a furnace with less venting. But one of the really great things about ground source heat pumps is that they can also be set up to provide your home's hot water needs. So it's kind of a twofer in that way. And that's one of the great benefits. Ground source heat pumps can also provide the hot water if you have hydronic or hot water baseboard or distribution. And then here's an example of what the ground portion looks like. So there's basically 2 main types. The first type over here is what's called a vertical well, where they bring out this giant truck and they dig a really deep hole, and then they run the loop field through that, and they grout it in and close the hole. And then there's horizontal loop fields, which you dig a very long and wide hole, and then you lay the loop field in through that. The type of well that needs dug for ground source heat pumps depends on where you live. And then it also depends, there's a little bit of cost implications here. So if you are really interested in installing a ground source heat pump system and you want to learn more, we really recommend talking to an installer because they know the details. But it will disturb your landscaping. All right, so I'm not going to go through this in detail just because we have a short amount of time, but we'll send the slides out after. But basically, with a heat pump, there's a couple major components. So this is a diagram of an air source heat pump. And basically inside the heat pump system, there's a closed loop of refrigerant. So that refrigerant never escapes from that closed loop. And it's controlled by the compressor, which can change the pressure of the refrigerant and allow it to release heat, to capture heat, and it also moves it around. Kind of like a heartbeat is the analogy I like to use. And so basically in the winter, what happens is there's always some type of residual heat in the air. And so that the refrigerant in that coil captures that residual heat in the air, it condenses it, and then it sends it, that heated up refrigerant, into the indoor system where a blower blows over the warmed up coil and it releases the heat. And then that refrigerant heads back outside to get more of that outdoor heat energy. Depending on the exact area you're in, because New York actually has a fairly wide range of climates. We're a little warmer in Western New York than in the North Country. Your installer may and probably will add an electric strip. So on those super cold days where the heat pump actually won't operate as efficiently, you'll have that option, but they really don't run that often. It's kind of a just in case thing. And then in the summer, the cycle reverses. And so the heat from the inside of your house that's too warm is captured by that refrigerant. It's condensed and sent outside, and then the condenser blows that hot air away. So if you've ever stood by a condenser in the summer that's running in air conditioned mode, you'll feel hot air blow. The same thing with just a typical AC condenser. And that's the hot air that you want out of your house leaving. And I should say, with ground source heat pumps, they operate the same with the refrigerant loop, but instead of using the outdoor air temperature as a base to heat or cool from, they use the Earth's temperature. So that's really the main difference, but it's the same exact idea of technology. So we always want to talk about maintenance with heat pumps. Maintenance is important with any heating system. So for air source heat pumps, if you use a forced air system, you should always clean and change your filters. It's so important for the life cycle and the efficiency of your system. So even if you have a gas system, please change your filters. The amount that you should change your filter depends on the heating system, and then it also depends on things like maybe how many pets you have, or if you're like me and constantly doing renovation and have a very dusty house, you should change it more. And then just like a fossil fuel heating system, you should have it checked by a professional once a year. And that way, if there's maybe a pump not working or a valve not working, they can switch that part out to make sure that you'll be warm all winter. And so that part doesn't necessarily break on the coldest day of the year. For ground source heat pumps, again, if you have a forced air distribution system, you should change your filters on a regular basis. The installer that Push for Clean Heat is partnered with, they actually monitor the system remotely. So they don't come out and do service checks, but they get flags when parts break. And 80% of the flags they get is people not changing their filter. But with a ground source heat pump, occasionally there are maybe a little pump or a valve that might need replacing. And so some installers will recommend maybe a biannual check or an annual check, but it's great always to go with the maintenance that the installer recommends. So one of the things that is so important with any home, but especially with an air source and ground source heat pumps, or if you're buying a new heating system in general, is that heat pumps work best in insulated homes. So if you have a home that's not very insulated, you're going to have to buy a bigger piece of equipment, and that equipment is going to have to work harder to be able to get your home as warm as you want it and to keep it that warm. And so if maybe you're not ready to switch out your heating system, or maybe you know your home's really uninsulated, insulating and weatherizing your home is a great step. And so there's a couple programs in New York State that can help you insulate and weatherize your home. There's the Comfort Home Pilot Program, which basically has incentive levels based on doing certain things. So the first level is insulating your attic, and you can get $1,000 towards the cost of insulating your attic. And then if you might be income qualified, there's Empower and Assisted Home Performance. And both those programs, they help with the cost of weatherization and insulation. They cover slightly different things, and they're kind of going through some changes right now, but they're great programs to apply for and a great way to get some additional funds to help you insulate and weatherize your home if you might be income qualified. And then a temporary program, if you are a current HEAP recipient, the Home Energy Assistance Program. There's a program to help HEAP recipients weatherize their home and install heat pumps, and you can get up to $20,000 per household for those programs. The measures must be installed by September 30th of this year. So if you're a current HEAP recipient and you're interested, reach out to your local heat pump campaign as soon as possible so we can start that process. And then if you want to learn more, you're not really sure where to start, there is probably a local community energy advisor near you. And like the clean heating groups, we don't work for a company. We're not a sales company. We don't make money off of sales. And so they can help you navigate the different energy programs in the state. So maybe you're really interested in heat pump technology, but your heating system's only a couple years old. You're not quite ready to switch it out. That's a great time to try a heat pump water heater. So heat pump water heaters are 2 to 3 times more efficient than a conventional electric water heater. They work using the same technology as an air source heat pump. And in New York State, this is the only type of heat pump that you can install yourself, or maybe have your favorite plumber install it and still get the incentive. They don't work everywhere. So they have to be installed in a space that stays between 40 and 90 degrees. And they will add a little bit of cool air to that space. So they're great in something like a basement, but if you live in maybe a mobile home or your water heater's in your kitchen, these might not be the best option for you. So the next few slides, I'm going to talk about money and incentives. And so this slide right here is a general pattern of operating costs. And the first thing I just want to say is the prices that I have for fuel is based on the New York State average. So energy prices range quite a bit across the state. So you might be a little higher or a little lower. The other thing with this chart is that your savings and operating costs are based on the existing efficiency of your system. So if you have a really old gas system, you would save more money than if you were switching from a heat pump and had a really efficient new gas system. You're unlikely to save in that case. So I'm going to go over this. So the red line is heating oil. That is the most expensive on average heating fuel in the state. And this blue line right here is a cold climate air source heat pump. And so you can see that no matter what temperature it is outside, you should see savings from switching from heating oil to a cold climate air source heat pump. This green line, that's propane. Propane is slightly less costly than heating oil, still very expensive. And so you also should see savings switching from a propane system. This gray line right here is gas. Methane gas, often called natural gas. Nothing natural about it. And methane gas is still pretty cheap. And so if you currently heat with gas, you are unlikely to see a lot of savings or any savings when you switch to a heat pump. Now I'm going to say a couple of things. The first is this gas line, when I was doing this presentation last year, was down here. So gas is slowly ticking up. The other thing is fuel costs vary a lot by a lot of different factors, some of which are predictable, some of which aren't, some of which are under our control, and some of them aren't. And so these projected savings are general patterns. There are people who speculate that gas is going to go up and just continue to go up. And so that savings might change in a few years. There are some people that think it's going to bounce up and down for a while. So if you're doing it completely for the savings, we would recommend, or I would recommend, I should say, that if you heat with oil or propane, you should definitely see savings. Additionally, if you heat with electric strip heating, so often electric baseboard, that costs at least twice as much to heat versus a cold climate air source heat pump, even though they use the same fuel. And the reason why is because electric strip heating, it basically uses energy to create heat. And so it's kind of like heating your house with a toaster. So I'm going to talk a little bit about money. These approximate costs vary a lot based on the size of your home, the system you install, and the efficiency of the system. And also just construction prices are kind of crazy right now. So these are general ballpark costs. So for a ground source heat pump, approximately, depending on the size of your house, if you incorporate hot water in it, $20,000 to $30,000 is the range. And the reason why it's so expensive is because you got to pay to dig that hole and to lay the loop field. But the thing is, the lifespan of that in-ground system is 50 to 100 years. And I have not heard of one getting dug out because its life cycle ended. So they last, for a really long time. The in-house system, similar to a furnace, is projected to last 15 to 25 years. And that again is based on maintenance as well as the exact system. There are a couple of different financial resources to install ground source. So there's incentives from the utility, there's federal tax credits, and if you are a current HEAP recipient, you can get money from the HEAP and heat pump program. For air source heat pumps, depending on the size of the system, if you're getting mini splits and all of that, it starts at $3,000 to $7,000 and just goes up. So if you have a really big house and you have lots of bedrooms and it's a really closed floor plan and you have to put mini splits in every room, you might see a number that's more like $20,000. And the life cycle of those systems are between 15 and 25 years, which is close to on par with a gas system as well. And then there's incentives from the utility for these. And you can also get financial assistance if you're a current HEAP recipient through that HEAP and heat pump program. Now, across New York State, if you're in a major utility territory, there's incentives that come through your electric utility. These incentives vary slightly. So if you're in Con Ed territory, you're going to see different incentives than if you're in National Grid territory, for example. The incentives for both air source and ground source heating are based on the size of the system and if you install a heating system that is capable of heating your whole home. So some people want a heat pump because they have a cold spot in their house that just never gets warm. So they're only installing it in one part of their house. And that incentive is around $500 depending on what utility you're with. If you install a whole house heating system, the incentive, it goes up significantly. Additionally, if you switch your hot water system at the same time, there's a little bit more money with that. And if you install a heat pump water heater, that's a $700 on average incentive through the utility, which helps bring that equipment cost down. And people always ask, like, how many incentives am I going to get? And that's really based, it's confirmed by the installer, because the installer wants to make sure that they install a heating system that's the right size for your house. And so they'll confirm the incentives when you get a quote. You have to work with a New York State clean heat installer to get incentives for a ground source or an air source heat pump. And that's because there are certain quality control measures that New York State has based those incentives on to prevent bad installations. And so with that, I'm going to stop and hand it over to my colleague, Hyam.
Thank you, Sarah.
Hi,
Go
hi.
ahead.
While you get set, I'm going to run a couple of quick polls, okay?
Great.
All right, hold on a second. Where are my other polls? Let's see.
And I should say, we'll go through questions at the end. So if you have them, we'll answer them. We're just going to do them all at the end.
All right, so we're going to ask folks, and this one you can choose, I think, as many as are correct. What is making you interested in heat pumps? So launching the poll now.
Let me know if I hope I'm not disturbing the poll by sharing my screen. Let me know.
Oh, you look good. And I'm
Okay.
going to also, I think, try to spotlight you, or I guess maybe I don't need to. Okay, we're gonna end this poll. We have 80%, 82% participation. You guys are great. Oh, 90% participation. I spoke too soon. Okay, so ending the poll, I'm gonna share the results. So it looks like we have a lot of people interested in getting off fossil fuels, 84% who participated in the poll, and quite about a third of you who need a new heating system. So this is a really good time to be investigating this. As you probably know, most people don't even think about their heating system until the end, until it dies, and then there's sort of a panic. So if you're thinking ahead, you're doing the right thing. I'm going to stop sharing this. And then I'm going to launch one more quick poll here, which is what kind of heat do you have now? So this is, if you have multiple kinds of heat, as many of us do upstate, just choose the primary heating fuel that you're using. Okay, this actually represents pretty well what we know to be the fuels used around New York. About half of you are on methane gas, otherwise known as fracked gas, otherwise known as natural gas. And but there's also a good number of you who are on expensive delivered fuels or electric resistance, which are the most expensive ways to heat. And then we have wonderful representation from our heat pump folks who are just here as enthusiasts and supporters. So thank you for being here. All right, I'm going to end the poll and introduce to you my friend and colleague, Chaim Gross from Brooklyn, New York City. Take it away, Chaim. Oh, I didn't share the poll results. I can
Oh,
share it.
no. Okay. Do you want to show them? Okay. There we are.
So this is the kind of heating. Were you able to see the other one? I did say share. Okay. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing, and this time, no kidding, I'm going to turn it over to Chaim.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Lisa and Sarah, and all of the folks from the Heat Smart campaigns. I'm going to try to run through this fairly quickly so we have time for some questions at the end, even though I saw we had a lot of questions on the chat already. So we're Heat Smart Brooklyn. We are implementing green retrofits in the County of Kings, supported by NYSERDA and the Brooklyn Borough President. Pretty picture here, but the short story is that dark green at the top, the energy source on the right, that's where the energy to power New York City comes from. On the left, it comes in on the left. On the right shows you where it goes. You see that over 60%, some people say closer to 2/3 of the energy goes to serve buildings, and a whole lot of that goes to heat buildings using natural gas. The nuclear in the gray line there is no longer with us. Indian Point has been closed. So right now, we're heating with gas and oil, and our electric power comes substantially from gas and oil fired power plants. So right now, New York City has a pretty dirty grid. So our campaign is like all of those across the state, promoting energy efficient envelopes, energy efficiency, and air source heat pumps. We don't really have a lot of options for ground source heat pumps in New York City. Maybe that's going to change, but we're asking people to improve the environment and have a more comfortable and healthy house, possibly save some greenhouse gas emissions and costs. But how do you do that? As I mentioned, Indian Point is no longer with us. We have a pretty robust campaign or a program through New York State to install an enormous facility of offshore wind. We're building a lot of solar in the state. So what we're trying to do is clean the grid, and we'll have to work on that. But there seem to be some moves in that direction. So what do we have to do? We have to improve energy efficiency. The only way to really save money and really save greenhouse gas emissions in switching from fossil fuels to clean electric air source heat pumps is to lower your energy use by having a more efficient envelope. One way to do that, you see a blower door on the left. That's a piece of equipment that's used to actually test the air tightness of a building. If you tighten up the building by doing weatherization and air sealing and blowing in insulation into the cavities, as you can see here, closing up the gaps between some of the pieces of structure, then you can really greatly improve the air tightness and the insulation value of a building and save energy in both heating and cooling. And that's what we're working on doing. Here's one slide showing how you can actually blow insulation into a flat roof. Here, a tenement roof. There's a space between the upper ceiling and the roof itself. And there's room for a lot of insulation to be blown in there. You can cut the roof open, blow that insulation in, seal the roof back up, and really help improve the whole building's energy efficiency. We've talked about cold climate air source heat pumps, and there are a number of ways that those can be installed so that the indoor units can be mounted on the wall. They can be recessed in the ceiling. They can be on a floor like the radiators that we're mostly familiar with in New York City. And the new technology allows those to work in very cold weather, as we've said. Even though we may be powering our air source heat pumps with electricity that comes out of a power plant, because the air source heat pumps are so efficient today, they can be more efficient than your gas furnace burning in your basement. So we say, stop burning fossil fuels in your basement. And as the grid gets cleaner, we're all going to save more greenhouse gas emissions. Now I'm going to ask that my friend and colleague Kendall Christensen be allowed into the panel, because what we're going to do is present the project that he did in his Brooklyn row house. Here are a couple of pictures of it. I just want to show these satellite images so that you can get an idea of why this is special. Row houses should be very efficient because they share walls with their neighbors. In most cases, if they're not at the dead end, they're going to have a lot of their exposure is going to be to their neighbors, and therefore they're not going to be losing heat or energy through those walls. They're only exposed on the front and the back and the roof. So if you can insulate them with good windows and air sealing, and you know, even though the masonry construction, which in most cases just has plaster on those masonry walls, is not very well insulated, there are things you can do to help the insulation. The reverse view here, where you can see the rear, shows the little courtyard where those folks from Green Team Long Island are installing the condenser unit on the outside. And if Kendall is able to talk, Kendall, are you there?
I'm here.
I'm going to just run this as your deck and let you take it from here. How's that?
Well, that's great. And I'm glad to do that, and glad to do it quickly because you've already gotten the basics on it. So this is just one example of how we adapted this system for our house that was built in around 1910 in Professor Cleverett's garden in Brooklyn. You saw the roof already. Keep going. Met Heim several years ago and began the discussion about this conversion. We had already done solar about 4 or 5 years ago. Our goal was to improve the overall performance of the house and its comfort level. And in the process, we took out 5 portable, 5 window air conditioners and 2 portables in our basement and got rid of them entirely. We also took out our gas burning furnace, took out our gas burning hot water heater, and replaced it all with air source heat pump and a hybrid hot water heater. Go ahead. So this is what we took out. That's the gas furnace from probably 40 years ago. And the piping that, was all connected to that. Most of that's gone now. Go ahead. This is the rear of the house that was difficult to see from that aerial shot, but we have 2 condensers installed on the rear wall outside of our kitchen, and the conduits that bring the line sets into the house. What was important for us is avoiding the aesthetics in a lovely 1910 house of having the air split units on the upper wall. So we figured out with our installers and my tremendously talented handyman how to hide 4 internal air handler units in the tops of closets like you see here, or over a stairwell. With 11-foot ceilings, we could do some crazy things with platforms and suspend all of that and hide it, and make that essentially invisible. Go ahead. So what you see here is the supply vents that bring the cool air into the cooler or warm air into the various rooms of the house. Each room has a vent about that size, about 6 by 10 or so, either in the floor, the ceiling, or the upper wall. This is the hybrid hot water heater being installed. It's functioned terrifically. No problems at all with adequate hot water for our home. This is, looks like a ceiling. Actually, it's a false ceiling over a stairwell. We lowered the ceiling in that stairwell about 3 feet and built a platform. And there's one air handler unit above that. And again, this shows the ductwork from that particular unit going to our kitchen and to our dining room, and another shot of the condensers on the rear wall. More installation shots of the ducts being hidden where we could find a place to hide them. And we're just coming up on the end of year one, the first week or two in April. For us, it was about an 8-day installation effort. Just some quick numbers on our total project cost, and our out-of-pocket was about $5,000 after the initial grant incentive and then financing through NYSERDA. And there's my site superintendent in the middle of the floor.
Loyal and very well behaved, it seems.
Yes, he was. She was.
Probably scared the crew into staying on the job. Thank you, Kendall. I mean, that's a really wonderful project. I have to say that we had a pretty cold winter, which may or may not be over. But did you have any glitches in this?
No, we were down to 10 to
10
15 degrees outside, and the house was very comfortable. The entire house, and which was not the case with the hot water, radiator system before.
Wow.
And
Okay.
last summer was terrific. My wife and I both worked from home, and the whole house comfort was fabulous. I did post in the chat. You can message me directly. I had Old House Journal come over and do a lovely article about it that I'm glad to send around. I don't know if it's available online or not. I don't have a link for it, but I'm glad to send you a PDF that you can use.
And I think we may have it up on our website. If we don't have it, we'll put it up so you can see it at heybrooklyn.org. That's our campaign website. So I'm just going to run through a couple more examples. Thank you, Kendall.
You're welcome.
You're a trooper. Here's another one of our happy customers from Park Slope. She's very active in the Park Slope Civic Council and had an article done on her row house. There's the outdoor unit mounted, in this case, in the rear yard on a pad. One of them, the other one at the sort of rear court, a similar condition to what we described. In this case, this customer has a rental unit. So there's an owner's unit and a rental unit, and they're run by separate condensers, and I believe on separate meters as well. Some details of the exterior and interior insulation, the line, the distribution of the refrigerant and electrical lines is a little bit tricky, but here they painted them dark brown to hide them a little bit in the brick color. Similarly, as you can see, if you do the indoor units, you have some of that conduit that you do your best to try to make it blend in. Another job is a 3-unit building that was done where each unit had their separate condensers and was billed separately to their meter, and an indication of some of the different ways that the indoor units are run. There's a floor-mounted unit taking the place of a steam radiator, and you can see the conduit or the line sets running on the side of the wall. This was also a successful project, as an example of a city row house. And we've done now, I think we're pushing over 60 successful projects in one of our families. We're also working very hard to engage with multifamily and commercial buildings, and we do our best to promote weatherization. You can visit us at heybrooklyn.org, and we really hope that as all of our stalwart comrades across the state and our folks from NYSERDA, who I see are listening in, are going to succeed in really helping to remove fossil fuels from the heating, the job of heating our buildings, and replace them with ever cleaner electric heating and cooling systems. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chaim. And we do have some time for your questions, although we've been very active in the chat. I'm going to run one more last quick poll here to get your feedback about our webinar to see if we're hitting the mark here. So we'll take a few seconds to run the poll. And please feel free to type your questions in the chat for Chaim, Michael and Sarah, Kendall, me, Scott Smith from NYSERDA, or Lauren from Westchester. We're all here and able to answer your questions. All right, I'll give a few more seconds on the poll here. Looks like we did okay. Gonna wrap this up when we get to 80% participation, I think. All right, I'm gonna wrap it up now. 74% participation, I'll settle for that. So looks like people were reasonably satisfied. And let's go to your questions. And if you haven't taken a look at the chat, I just posted a link for people who might be interested in helping us to advocate for better, faster, more equitable clean heat policies so that we can get heat pumps to every household in New York, and efficient appliances and all kinds of codes that will help support the CLCPA recommendations. I also posted the link to sign up for our future webinars. We'll have another one in 2 weeks. I also posted the link to our previous webinar on induction cooking. All of these webinars are live streamed on the Renewable Heat Now Facebook page and archived on the Renewable Heat Now YouTube channel. Okay, so let's stop sharing, Chaim, so we can see all the good folks out there. And go ahead and see what questions you might have.
Oh, hang on a second. I thought I stopped sharing, but let me see if I.
You did. I see everybody.
Okay, great.
Look at this beautiful crew.
Okay,
Sarah, do you see any questions?
there's a lot of questions. So I'm just gonna pick them at random because there's a
Okay.
bunch. So one person asked about heating or air source heat pumps functioning in really cold climates, which is a great question. So a while ago, the first few iterations of heat pumps, they didn't work as well in cold climates. So you may have heard about that. But in the past couple of decades, they've made what are called cold climate air source heat pumps, and they're heat pumps that are made to function efficiently in cold climates. They're used in Canada, they're used in like very northern climates, and those are the heat pumps that New York State provides incentives for. And they're actually tested at different temperatures. So they're tested at 5 degrees, at -17. And so installing those cold climate air source heat pumps is a great way to make sure that your home is comfortable year round. And there's an organization called NEEP that has actually been studying these heat pumps in very cold climates to make sure they work. And then additionally, a lot of installers will install an electric strip in your heating system. So on the very cold days, if maybe the heat pump's not going to run as efficiently or something happens, you'll always have that backup source. So there's a couple of different built-in protections there.
Great, Sarah. I saw a question about changing the filters. I will give my typical answer for that, which is that if we're talking about the filters for, say, an air source heat pump, like a mini split, the filters just pop out of those units. They're very easy to clean. It takes just a few minutes. And how often you have to clean them? If you are a terrible housekeeper with a lot of pets in an old house like me, then you should clean them more often, probably at least once a month. But if you live in a newer, less dusty house without 4 cats, 2 dogs, and the occasional chicken, then you might get away with cleaning them every 3 months. So you should sort of base that on your own situation. If you're talking about ground source, the filter can be cleaned and changed. It doesn't need to be cleaned that or changed that often, once or twice a year. You can get reusable ones that can just be cleaned off, or you can get disposable ones. And a really important thing is the outdoor condenser for an air source heat pump does need to be cleaned. And that is especially true if you live near cottonwood trees. So if you live near cottonwood trees and you have an air source heat pump, you should mark on your calendar that in June you should schedule someone to come, or some people do it themselves, and make sure that that outdoor unit is cleaned off, because it affects the function of your heat pump. It also affects its longevity. So you want to get those cottonwood seeds off. Who wants to take the next question? Chaim, do you have one you want to take?
There was a question from Carol about how many of the houses are owner occupied. All of the houses that I'm aware of that we've done, and most of the ones that we've engaged with in Brooklyn, are owner occupied, but many of them do have a rental unit or two, or they have a family, a separate apartment for a family member. Some of them, have, a lot of them have home offices, or, some of them have, sort of commercial workspaces in them as well. So it's a pretty good variety. But, as I mentioned, we're just beginning now turns out a very difficult task of working with small co-ops and small multifamily buildings. And these are much more complicated projects that we're not going to discuss now, but I just want to make a shout out to all of those across the state, especially all of you intrepid advocates and campaigners. God, I mean, you guys must know the halls of Albany like better than the elected officials, I would think. And we need some help. We really need some help getting to these multifamily buildings, and many of them are affordable housing. And making these energy efficient and converting these from fossil fuels is a big job, and one that we're doing our best to address, but we need help. So let them know for the next budget season. We're going to be there.
Yes, if you do social media at all, please follow Renewable Heat Now on Twitter and Facebook. I posted a link in the chat how you can get involved locally, meeting with your elected officials. If you are a heat pump enthusiast or someone who cares about the climate, we really want you and need you, because we're actually making great progress in New York, and the fossil fuel industry is running scared, and they just dumped, I think, literally millions of dollars into a statewide campaign to defeat our policy platform. You may have even seen ads on TV or heard them on the radio, and they are calling themselves New Yorkers for Affordable Heating. So that they are all the gas companies, some of the utilities, and several other entities. It's every gas company, every gas pipeline and power plant company that we have been fighting in New York for the past decade have banded together to fund this campaign to defeat the building electrification movement. And some of those lily-livered legislators are running scared because of this campaign. So we need to boost them up and give them courage by calling them and saying that we want them to move forward with this agenda. Okay, Michael or Sarah, do you want to take another question?
Yeah, Sarah, I see that there's been a couple questions tonight actually regarding the operating costs. Do one of you guys mind bringing up that slide that showed the difference in prices for different heating?
Yeah, Sarah can bring that slide back up. I will say something about costs. One of the things about the costs is they are very different across the state, and they also can fluctuate. The cost of electricity is supposed to be more stable than the cost of fossil fuels. But this winter most of us did get a price hike in our electricity prices. And so Sarah's chart is not necessarily the costs that are for you, and you should research what the costs are locally. Go ahead, Sarah, and take the rest, or Michael, and take the rest of this question.
So I can go ahead and take this. So a couple of things that I saw in the chat, and then Edward, I see your hand up and we'll get to you next. But with the operating costs, these are general patterns. And so it really depends on exactly how much you're paying and the efficiency of your existing system and the system that you're going to install. But there was a question in the chat that the gray line, the methane gas line, is lower. And, you know, that's true that currently right now, it is, if you have an efficient or a newer gas system, you would not see savings switching to a cold climate air source heat pump. However, if you switch to a ground source heat pump, because of how low their operating costs are, you should see savings, but the installation cost upfront is a lot higher.
I will say that a couple of things about that. One is that we've seen a report from neighboring Massachusetts that, you know, projects these costs into the future. So into the lifetime of a unit, if you were to get one this year, you would very likely see gas heating costs exceed electric heating with an air source heat pump. So although, you know, we don't have a crystal ball and we can't guarantee what prices will be in the future, that is what most people do expect to see. And as you probably all know, there's, you know, global and international security implications of the gas market. And the other thing I'll say is that one very exciting and interesting thing that is projected to happen in New York, and our webinar on May 26th, the final webinar of this series, is going to go over this, is this idea of community-wide, neighborhood-wide geothermal. So imagine a utility scale geothermal system where there's a shared ground loop of water, and then each house can, or building, can connect to that. And that is sort of, NYSERDA is actively funding scoping studies across all of New York to see where these kinds of systems might get built. And many of us consider this to be the way that the equitable and rapid way that many more people could access the efficient and low cost ground source heating systems. Thanks, Edward. Well, I will call on you next.
Okay, thanks very much. I am from Massachusetts, and I'm familiar, I think, with that study of comparative of gas prices versus heat pumps in the future. But my question is that we have a forced hot water system, and we're on the 3rd floor of a 6-unit building where there are 2 units on 1 floor. And the question is where you locate an air source heat pump compressor. And then also what we're proposing to do is take and have an electric boiler, a slant fin, as a companion for a air source heat pump on one part of the building. And Question, does that make sense? Have you, anyone who's done that before with a combination of electric boiler and a air source heat pump, where the air source heat pump heats one side of the house and cools it, because you have air conditioners in two other rooms on the other side? A hybrid system. I'm sure there are a lot of people with forced hot water find it difficult to convert to a heat pump.
Yeah, Edward brings up a really great question. People with hot water systems have a bunch of different options, none of which is sort of a perfect solution. And which one is right for you depends on you. We have seen some systems go in where more than one technology is combined. Who else would like to take a crack? Chaim, do you want to take a crack at Edward's question? Thanks, Edward.
I'm sorry, I'm still wrapping my head around the question of the operating costs. Can you repeat the question quickly if it's a different
Sure,
question?
we have a forced hot water system. We're it's gas right now, a gas boiler. We want to change into that an electric boiler, and also have as a companion system, a hybrid system, an air source heat pump. On a third floor unit, we put that on our deck outside. Whether you're familiar with anyone who's with that type of installation where you have that hybrid system.
I've asked about that because we do have you know, a significant number of hydronic systems, you know, I think in general, and I don't know if anybody has any news on this, but this is something we found is challenging, the domestic hot water, and by extension, you know, circulating hot water for heat through a heat pump system. It seems like the technology isn't quite there yet. And so I haven't heard anything, you know, terribly optimistic about trying to create a system like that. You know, it's not the subject of our discussion here today, but you know, once upon a time, people used solar panels to make hot water. Can you imagine anything more absurd and high tech than that? And yet there are no incentives for it. It's frowned upon. People act like plumbing is, you know, handling nuclear waste. But, you know, it seems like when people are talking about clean heat, we ought to think about solar thermal. I know there are issues with, you know, having too much hot water in the summertime and not enough in the wintertime, but seems like the kind of thing that might serve in some cases to perhaps help out in a situation like yours. There is a source for hot water that is free.
Well, we do have 5 people who want to do this around the area, do an electric boiler for the hot water and put in some supplemental air source heat pump. And some might even put a solar panel on the roof, depending on how that total cost comes up. But thank you, that's very helpful.
I think we're all early adopters at this point. We got to solve these problems. So, but first insulate your building as much as you can.
So we are 10
That's done.
time here, and I really try to start and end all our webinars on time. I didn't quite make it tonight because our wonderful presenters just had so much to say. I want to really thank Sarah and Michael from Push for Clean Heat in Buffalo, and Chaim and Kendall from Heat Smart, Cool Smart Brooklyn. And Kendall is our wonderful, volunteer homeowner and gave a great testimonial. Sarah and Chaim, can you stay on a little longer if folks still have questions? Great. So we're just going to say thank you. Good night. Thank you for coming. Tell your friends, share this on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, get involved with advocacy, contact your local Heat Smart program, and please join us for future webinars. We'll be very happy to see you. Meanwhile, we'll stay on a little longer if people have more questions. Thank you very, very much. Yes, we could share the slides out afterwards for sure.
Thanks, everyone. Really, thanks for coming and thanks for organizing this. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, you guys are great.
And maybe if folks have questions, just because we tried to keep them in the chat, maybe either raise your hand or type in stack. So I see Tara first.
Hi there. I don't think my question was answered in the chat, but I'm on my phone, so it's not so easy to check the chat. I am interested in what's the pluses and minuses of putting a single heat pump or two heat pumps in a building that has a oil heating system that's pretty recent and basically based on some investigation we did on switching over the whole system, it seemed like that was not going to be something that we were going to afford to do anytime soon. So but rather than buying more window units, having one heat pump in, I thought maybe could take care of some of our shoulder season stuff. Anyway, if anybody has any comments on that. I'm like doing a partial install, basically.
Somebody
mean,
have any thoughts? Oh, go ahead, Chaim.
It might do the trick. I mean, you know, potentially it wouldn't be that invasive. It's kind of like doing an apartment system, you know, probably one condenser and, you know, maybe one or two indoor units. I'm wondering though, if there isn't a kind of a, you know, kind of a cost of entry, you know, just getting a project done, getting a contractor to pay attention to it, to actually sign it up. You probably won't get the incentives if you're not doing 90% of the heating load for the building, and that's a big deal. The incentives are, you know, pretty substantial, and so it would be, you know, it would be a supplemental project, and it might cost, you know, more for the you know the BTUs you're getting than if you were doing a, you know, a full system, both for the scale and also for the incentives, the lack of incentives.
Do you know if the incentives still require you to complete the, I can't remember what the name of the program is. Like we had blower door test and the New York State, like a New York State approved contractor look at our place for like recommend insulation measures. And they recommended $40,000 worth of insulation measures.
Wow.
And we have a borderline, like our house is borderline as far as meeting radon addressed. So if we did the insulation, we would probably have to address the radon as well. And I feel like I'm even forgetting something else that was stopping. Oh, and also it would have gotten rid of our used storage space in our attic. So like with the three of those things together, it just seemed like we're not going to follow at least all of their insulation advice, which means that I thought that knocked us out of being able to access the incentives for installing heat pumps anyway.
Yeah, let me jump in. So yeah, first of all, when you're absolutely right. When you insulate and seal off your basement, if you have radon, you need to get a radon system put in to blow that to the outdoors. So that's a very good point you bring up there. And you know, when we do say you should insulate and air seal your house as much as possible before getting a heat pump, that also varies by person and house, that we each only have so much budget. And we have to figure out what makes sense for your house, you know. So some houses, a moderate amount of money can make a really big dramatic difference in terms of the insulation and the air sealing and what size heat pump system you would need and how it would be used. Other houses, you like mine, you could spend $100,000, which is a third of the value of my home, insulating and air sealing, and it would still be leaky as a sieve. So you have it's not one rule for every house, which is why you really want to talk to you know, some very good contractors. The other thing is, you know, I can make incremental improvements to my home's air sealing and insulation over time. But the heat pump is sort of a one-time thing. So you want to do that when you can do it within reason. Of course, if your house can't support a heat pump, you don't want to get one. So back to the incentives. It's really only the income-based incentives that are limited by your home's level of insulation. Because it's irresponsible for New York State to give money to low-income people and then put in a heating system that they can't afford to run, right? We don't do that in New York. So that's why that's so limited. As far as whether it will work for you and what it will cost to run and what makes sense for your house, for the clean heat program, as long as you have a heat pump system that is properly designed for the heat load of your house, you can still get the incentives. So, but you want to be practical. So you wouldn't want to, there was an example of one of the top job projects for the New York Geothermal Conference. That's the Louisa May Alcott House. And because it was a historic home, they weren't allowed to do any insulation. So this simple 2-story colonial had like an 80,000 ton system or something like that. Let's not put that in every house in New York. It would be completely impractical and unaffordable and take way too much energy off the grid. So we don't want to see that happening. So it's really a case, if you have an older house, especially, Tara, to really think carefully about your budget, your long-term plans, talk to a number of people, think about what are some things you can do yourself in terms of insulation, air sealing. There's actually quite a bit that an individual homeowner can do, around things like plugs and outlets and windows and doors, and think about what you would want to pay a contractor to do. For example, you are not going to, spray foam the rim joist of your house by yourself, but that could be something you could get done affordably. All right, I'm rambling on. So you guys.
Also, I think that there, the comfort home incentives are improved, I think, and I don't know if they're going to impact a situation like Tara's, but at the very least, there is some money to do that insulation, and that's going to lower your operating costs no matter what you do.
Within reason.
Thanks.
Within reason, yes.
And I have to say that, I feel confident giving this advice because it's about weighing the insulation and air sealing against the cost of putting in your heat pump and making the right decision, because it came to me from Bob Howarth himself, who's on the Climate Action Council. So he has an old leaky house like mine with a ground source heat pump system. And so I feel confident in that advice. Yeah, great plug for the Comfort Home system. So this is the only program that gives any incentives for weatherization for people who are not low income. There are actually a few contractors around the state participating in this program. Not every contractor does participate in Comfort Home, and whether or not that program makes sense for you is going to depend on what your house needs. Yeah, Tara, my farmhouse is 1840, so I'm right there with you. It's a monument to heat loss. It's like the worst possible house for a person promoting energy efficiency. Someday I'm going to do a video about my house that's sort of like what not to do. And I'm just going to walk you guys through my house from basement to the top floor, and you can see the skylights that were put in and all the holes in my house that let the air out in and out that I'm going to have to deal with. Yes, that's why I knit all these warm wool sweaters and just keep the temperature down. All right, but I think the point I like to bring up about my house is a home ownership is complicated, life is complicated, and we all want to do the right thing, but we can't all do everything right away. So the Heat Smart program is here to help you to make an individual plan that makes sense for you. And what that looks like might not be exactly the same as what everybody else looks like. So you want to talk to some good and honest contractors. You want to get in touch with your Heat Smart program, and you want to just sort of make a plan for what works for your life. And meanwhile, we're going to keep advocating for policy to help make this faster, easier, and more affordable for everyone in New York.
And we're here to help you guys through the process as well. That's another aspect of our job. So if you have any questions regarding anything that you heard tonight, or if you do any more research and you have more questions, that's also part of our job. So I can't understate that. We're here to help.
Exactly. I was going to say something earlier when that other gentleman spoke. We don't often talk about this, but I often get a call from someone who says, I didn't know about heat pumps. And just last year, I put in a brand new gas furnace, but I got the most efficient one I could get, and they just feel terrible. There is actually a pretty good heat pump option for those people. It's a so-called dual fuel or hybrid heat pump. It's like a heat pump that marries or mates with your gas furnace. And it can provide the cooling, and it can heat your house when the heat pump is in its most efficient sweet spot in those temperatures. And after a certain set point, when the temperature drops below that set point, then the gas kicks on. So you could use a lot less gas, have the air conditioning advantage of a heat pump, and still use the heat pump when it's at its most efficient. There are no state incentives for those systems, but they are pretty affordable. And actually, I think 3 members of the Heat Smart Tompkins board have the dual fuel systems and are very, very happy with them. So, there again, it's like, find the right option for your house. There's no one perfect thing for everybody. And don't feel terrible. Everyone's doing just the best they can with the information they have at the time, right? That's all we.
And we're also all, juggling the messaging challenge of, the apples to oranges of, we want to get rid of the dirty heating systems, but in exchange, we're getting a heating and cooling system. So, what's the value of that? It's obviously a great value to it, but it's not the same for everyone. I mean, one of the challenges we have in parts of Brooklyn and New York City is that, and this is an equity question, I suppose, is that, the people who have country houses and beach houses might not care so much about the cost of air conditioning, cost of anything. They got a lot of money. So there are equity issues and, issues of how you compare the value to the environment, the value to individual people, how they live. We have to be very, friendly and persuasive to everybody, and take them, as they come.
Exactly. Well, I think with those words, we should probably wind down now. We're almost a half hour over our time. It's just so gratifying that all of you are still here and asking questions. And that I think you have all the ways to contact the folks in your local Heat Smart program if you want to continue the conversation one-on-one. Or join us again in 2 weeks' time when we have, what's happening in 2 weeks? Is it the weatherization or is it the low income programs? I can't remember what's next. Anyway, feel free to join us on a future webinar, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon. I'll attempt to email back out the link and all the slides at some point. And have a very pleasant evening and stay safe out there. Bye, everybody.